The chandeliers above the ballroom were dripping with crystal. I remember staring up at them for longer than I should have, because I didn't want to look at anyone yet. Not at him. Not at his mother. Not at the 400 guests in tuxedos and gowns that probably cost more than my parents' first car. I just stood near the back doors of the Whitley estate in upstate Connecticut, holding the small bouquet of white peonies my mother had picked from her own garden that morning. And I told myself one more time that this was real, that I was about to marry the man I loved, that tonight would be the night everything came together. My name doesn't matter as much as what I did that night, but for the sake of this story, I'll tell you. I'm Margot. Margot Pemberley Vance, 31 years old, born in Hartford, raised in a yellow 2-story house on a street where every neighbor knew my dad's truck by the sound of its engine. My father, Donovan, spent 34 years as a firefighter. He retired 3 years ago, not because he wanted to, but because of what happened during a warehouse blaze in 2018. He went back into that building twice. The second time, he carried out a 14-year-old boy who had been hiding in a storage closet. He didn't carry out his own right leg. They amputated it just below the knee 3 days later. He never complained about it. Not once. He just learned to walk with the prosthetic. Learned to garden again. Learned to dance with my mother at the kitchen counter on Sunday mornings while she made pancakes. My mother, Coraline, worked at a bakery on Sigourney Street for 28 years. The kind of bakery where the windows fog up in the winter from the heat of the ovens and the regulars know your name before you finish saying it. She made my wedding cake herself. 3 tiers, lemon and elderflower with sugar peonies she'd been practicing for months in our kitchen. I told her she didn't have to. She told me she wanted to, and my fiancé, the man I had been engaged to for 14 months. His name was Hollis Bramwell, and his family owned a chain of luxury boutique hotels along the East Coast called Bramwell Reserve. 12 properties from Newport to Charleston. His mother, Tessabelle, was the kind of woman who said the word darling the way other people use punctuation. His father, Whitfield, mostly stayed quiet, mostly drank, and mostly let his wife run everything except the wine cellar. I met Hollis at a charity dinner 2 years before our wedding. I was there in a borrowed dress, sitting at a table I shouldn't have been at because the woman who was supposed to attend in my place had food poisoning and my company sent me last minute. He sat down next to me, asked me what I did, and when I told him I worked in finance, he smiled and said, "Specifically?" And I said, "Specifically, I help families like yours not lose their money." He laughed. He thought I was joking. That's the thing. That's the part of the story everyone always asks me about later. How could he not know? How could his whole family not know? And the answer is so simple, it's almost embarrassing. They never asked. Not once in 2 years did they ask me what I actually did. They asked where I went to school, and I told them, and they didn't recognize the name, so they moved on. They asked who my parents were, and when I said my dad was a retired firefighter and my mom worked at a bakery, Tessabelle smiled the way you smile at a child who's just told you they want to be a unicorn when they grow up, and she changed the subject. They assumed I was a junior analyst somewhere. A girl who got lucky meeting their son. A girl who would be grateful to be absorbed into their world. I let them assume. I'm not proud of it. But I let them assume because every time I thought about correcting them, I thought about Hollis. And I thought, he loves me for me. He doesn't care about any of that. And I wanted to believe that more than I wanted to be honest about who I was. What I actually did, for the record, was run the private equity arm of a firm in Manhattan called Halverson Reed. I had been there for 9 years. I was a partner. My portfolio at the time of my wedding included controlling interests in a logistics company, 2 regional banks, a software firm, and a hospitality group that had recently acquired the senior debt on a chain of luxury boutique hotels along the East Coast. You can see where this is going. But I didn't then. I genuinely didn't. The acquisition had closed 6 weeks before the wedding. I hadn't told Hollis because I didn't think I had to. The deal was made through 3 layers of holding companies and a sovereign fund, I advised. My name wasn't on anything public. To his family, I was still just Margot from Hartford, the girl with the firefighter dad. The rehearsal dinner was on a Friday at the Whitley estate. My parents drove up that afternoon in my dad's old Ford. My mother had bought a new dress at Macy's, navy blue with little silver buttons down the front. My father wore the only suit he owned, a charcoal gray one he'd had since my college graduation, and he wore his fire department dress jacket over it. He told me on the phone the night before, "I want them to know who I am, kiddo. I'm not going to pretend to be something I'm not. They can take me or leave me." I said, "Dad, you don't have to wear the jacket." And he said, "Margot, yes I do." I cried in the bathroom for 10 minutes after that call. I didn't know why. Now I know why. The rehearsal dinner was outdoors, on the south lawn, under a white canopy strung with lights. Tessabelle had insisted on assigned seating, even for a rehearsal dinner, because she said it helped the flow. She placed my parents at table 11. Table 11 was behind a topiary. You couldn't see the head table from table 11. You couldn't see anything from table 11 except the catering tent. I didn't know about the seating until I saw my dad. He was already there, sitting in his wheelchair, because the path from the parking lot was gravel and he didn't want to risk falling. My mother was standing next to him, holding her little clutch purse with both hands, the way she does when she's nervous. They looked so small under that canopy. They looked like two people who had been forgotten on the way to somewhere else. I walked over fast. I said, "Mom, Dad, why are you back here?" And my mother smiled and said, "Oh, the nice young woman with the clipboard said this is our table, honey. It's fine." And my father said, "Margot, don't make a scene. It's a nice dinner. Sit down with your future husband. We're fine." I went and found Hollis. He was at the bar with his brother. I said, "Why are my parents at table 11? And he looked at me and there was a half second of something on his face I didn't recognize. And then he said, "Babe, my mom did the seating. I'm sure there's a reason. Let's just enjoy tonight." I said, "Hollis, they can't see anything from table 11. And he said, "Margot, please. Not now. I should have left then." That was my first chance. I had others. I didn't take any of them. I went back to my parents. I sat with them for 20 minutes before someone came over and said the head table was waiting. My mother said, "Go on, sweetheart. This is your night." And my father patted my hand and said, "We have each other. We're good. Go." So I went. That was Friday. The actual wedding was Saturday afternoon. I want to tell you that Saturday morning I woke up, and I knew. I want to tell you that I had some clarifying dream, some moment of insight. But the truth is, I woke up still hoping. I woke up still wanting it to be okay. I put on the dress my mother had helped me pick out at a bridal shop in West Hartford. I let my cousin do my hair. I drank a glass of champagne that tasted like nothing. I told myself the rehearsal dinner was a mistake, a misunderstanding, and today would be different. The ceremony was at 4 in the afternoon, in the gardens behind the main house. My father walked me down the aisle. Or, rather, he wheeled himself alongside me and I held the handle of his chair with one hand and my bouquet with the other. He looked up at me halfway down the aisle and he winked. And I almost broke. I almost stopped right there and turned around and took him home. But I kept walking because I loved Hollis. Because I had spent 2 years loving Hollis. Because the music was playing and 400 people were watching and my mother was already crying in the front row, and you don't stop a wedding because of a feeling. The ceremony itself was short. 20 minutes. I said I do. Hollis said I do. We kissed. People clapped. Then we walked back up the aisle as husband and wife. The reception was in the ballroom. That's where the chandeliers were. That's where the 400 guests had moved to, glasses in hand, waiting for the first dance and the toasts and the cake. That's where my mother had set up her 3-tier lemon elderflower cake on a side table near the entrance, because Tessabelle had told her there wasn't room for it on the main dessert display. The main dessert display had a 6-foot croquembouche and a chocolate fountain. My mother's cake was on a folding table covered with a white cloth off to the side like an afterthought. I noticed my parents weren't at the head table during dinner. They were at table 27. 27 of 29 tables. Behind a wall sconce, I asked the maître to move them. He said, "I'm sorry, ma'am, the seating chart was approved by Mrs. Bramwell." I said, "I'm the bride." He said, "I understand, ma'am. I have my instructions." I went to find Tessabelle. She was holding court near the bar with 3 of her friends, all of them in beaded dresses, all of them holding glasses of champagne. I said, "Tessabelle, I need to move my parents to the head table." She smiled at her friends, then at me. She said, "Darling, the head table is for the wedding party. Your parents are perfectly comfortable where they are." I said, "They're behind a sconce, they can't see anything." And then she said it. She said it in that voice. She said it in that voice. She said, "Darling, this level of event isn't quite for everyone. They seem more comfortable back there. Let's not embarrass anyone tonight, shall we?" The 3 women laughed. Not loudly, the way women like that laugh. Low in their throats, behind their champagne glasses. I stood there. I looked at her. I looked at her friends. I looked at Hollis, who was 20 feet away, talking to his groomsmen, who had clearly heard her, who was clearly going to say nothing. And then I heard one of the friends say, just loud enough, "Did you see his jacket? With the patches? My God!" And another one said, "The fire department won." I thought it was a costume. I turned. I walked away. I didn't say anything to Tessabelle. I didn't say anything to anyone. I walked across the ballroom, past my table, past the head table, past the dessert display with the croquembouche, all the way to the back, to table 27, where my parents were sitting alone behind a wall sconce. My mother was eating a roll. My father was sitting very still, his hands folded in his lap, looking down at the tablecloth. He wasn't eating. He had his head tilted down just slightly, the way he does when he's trying not to feel something. That was the moment. If you ever want to know what the breaking point of a person looks like, it's not the loud part. It's not the screaming. It's the moment a daughter sees her father, the man who walked into a burning building twice, the man who lost his leg saving a stranger's child, sitting with his head down at a folding chair behind a wall sconce, while a woman in a beaded gown laughs about his jacket. I sat down next to him. I took his hand. I said, "Dad." He didn't look up. He said, "I heard her, sweetheart. It's okay. Don't worry about me." I said, "Dad, look at me." He looked up. His eyes were wet, but he was smiling, that small, tight smile he does when he's pretending he's fine. He said, "Margot, I love you. Whatever you want to do, I love you. We can go home right now if you want." I kissed his cheek. I said, "I'll be right back." I walked to the small staircase that led up to the band's platform. The bandleader was a man named Reginald something. I never caught his last name. I tapped him on the shoulder. I said, "I need the microphone for a few minutes." He looked at me. He looked at his band. He shrugged and handed it over. The music stopped. 400 people turned their heads. I want to be honest with you about how I felt in that moment. I wasn't angry. Not the hot kind. I was something colder. I was something I hadn't been in a long time, which was the version of me that walked into a partners meeting in Manhattan on a Tuesday morning and decided who lived and who died, financially speaking. I was the version of me that nobody at this wedding knew existed, not even my husband of 40 minutes. I said into the microphone, "Good evening, everyone. For those of you who haven't met me, I'm Margot. I'm the bride. Thank you all for coming." People clapped, a little uncertainly. I said, "Before we begin the toasts, I want to take a moment to introduce my parents, because I've realized that not enough people here have actually met them. My father, Donovan Pemberley, served the city of Hartford as a firefighter for 34 years. 3 years ago, he lost his right leg pulling a 14-year-old boy out of a burning warehouse. The boy survived. My father has never told that story to anyone in this room because he doesn't think it's worth telling. He's wrong. It's worth telling." I paused. The room was very, very quiet. My mother, Coraline Pemberley, baked the cake on the table by the entrance. She baked it herself, in our kitchen, over 3 days, while my father iced the sugar flowers because she has arthritis in her right hand, and he wanted to help. She has worked at the same bakery in Hartford for 28 years. I looked at table 27. My mother had her hand over her mouth. My father was looking at me, and he wasn't smiling anymore. He was just looking, his eyes wide. I want to thank them tonight, because everything I am, every single thing I am, came from them. I am their daughter. That is the most important thing about me, and it is something I should have made clearer, much earlier, to certain people in this room. I shifted the microphone in my hand. For the past 2 years, the family I just married into has assumed certain things about me. I let them. That was my mistake. I let them think I was a girl from Hartford who got lucky meeting their son at a charity dinner. So tonight, while everyone is here, I'd like to correct the record. I could see Tessabelle now from the platform. She had stopped moving. She had her glass of champagne halfway to her mouth, frozen like a photograph. My name is Margot Pemberley Vance. I'm a senior partner at Halverson Reed Capital. I run the private equity division. For those of you who follow such things, our most recent acquisition, which closed 6 weeks ago, was the senior debt on a hospitality group called Bramwell Reserve, the group my new in-laws own, or more accurately, used to own outright. As of 6 weeks ago, the controlling interest is held by a fund I advise. They were not notified because the acquisition went through a sovereign vehicle. They're being notified now. I heard a glass break somewhere in the back. I don't know who dropped it. I want to be very clear about something. I did not buy that debt to hurt this family. I bought it because it was a good business decision and it fit my portfolio. I had every intention of leaving them alone, of being a quiet partner, of letting my husband's family continue running their hotels without ever knowing I was involved. I looked directly at Tessabelle now. But tonight, the mother of the man I just married told me that this level of event was not for my parents, that they were more comfortable behind a wall sconce. Her friends laughed about my father's fire department jacket, the one he wore tonight because he is proud of the work he did for 34 years, because he is proud of who he is. I took a slow breath. So I'd like to make an announcement. Effective Monday morning, the fund I advise will be calling the senior debt on Bramwell Reserve. We will not be restructuring. We will not be negotiating. The properties will be liquidated and the proceeds redistributed to the shareholders of the fund, of whom I am the largest. The Bramwell family will retain their personal residences. They will retain their personal accounts. They will not retain the company. There was no sound in the room. None. 400 people, and nothing. I would also like to announce that, as of this moment, I am annulling this marriage. My attorney will file paperwork on Monday. Hollis, I'm sorry. I wanted to believe you'd say something tonight. You didn't. That tells me everything I need to know. I slid the wedding ring off my finger. I didn't make a scene about it. I just put it down on the platform next to the microphone stand. I want to thank Hollis's family for their hospitality this weekend. I want to thank everyone for coming. The cake by the entrance was made by my mother. It is the best lemon elderflower cake any of you will ever eat. I hope you'll try a slice on the way out. I handed the microphone back to Reginald. He took it slowly, like he wasn't sure it was real. I walked off the platform. I walked across the ballroom. I didn't look at Hollis. I didn't look at Tessabelle. I walked all the way to table 27, and I knelt down next to my father's wheelchair and I said, Dad, Mom, let's go home. My father started crying. Not loud, just quietly. He put his hand on the side of my face and he said, Margot, sweetheart, you didn't have to do that for us. And I said, Dad, I didn't do it for you. I did it because of you. There's a difference. My mother stood up. She picked up her little clutch purse with both hands. She said, Should we take some of the cake home, honey? And I laughed for the first time all day. I said, Mom, yes, let's take the whole cake. We walked out of the ballroom together. I pushed my father's wheelchair, my mother carried what she could of the cake, and the catering staff helped us with the rest. We loaded everything into my dad's old Ford in the parking lot. Nobody stopped us. Nobody followed us. Hollis didn't follow us. I don't know what I would have done if he had. I drove. My dad sat in the front seat. My mother sat in the back with 2 tiers of cake on her lap. About 20 minutes outside the estate, my father reached over and put his hand on my arm. He said, Margot, was any of that real? The hotels thing? And I said, Dad, yeah, all of it. He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, I always thought you were a smart kid. And my mother said from the back seat, Donovan, she is a smart kid. She just never wanted to brag about it. And he said, I know, honey, I know. We stopped at a Denny's off I-91 around 11 at night. I was still in my wedding dress. My mother had a piece of her own cake. My father had pancakes. I had coffee, and then I had pancakes too. The waitress, who must have been 23 years old, kept staring at me. Finally, she said, "Honey, did you just leave a wedding?" And I said, "Yeah." And she said, "Yours?" And I said, "Yeah." And she nodded slowly and said, "Coffee's on me, sweetheart." The next part is the part I don't talk about much, but I'll tell you because the story isn't complete without it. Monday morning, my legal team filed the annulment papers and the debt call simultaneously. The Bramwell family received notice at 9:14 a.m. By Tuesday, 3 of their major investors had pulled out, citing reputational concerns. Word travels fast in that world. Apparently, the rehearsal dinner and the reception had been attended by enough finance people that the story had reached every desk on Wall Street by Sunday night. By the end of the following month, 8 of the 12 properties were listed for sale. By the end of the year, Bramwell Reserve no longer existed as a company. Tessabel tried to call me twice. I didn't answer. She sent a letter, eventually, through Hollis's lawyer. It was a long letter. I read the first paragraph and stopped. There wasn't an apology in it. Only an explanation. I don't need explanations from people like that. I never did. Hollis sent his own letter 6 weeks after the wedding. His was shorter. He said he had loved me. He said he wished he had spoken up that night. He said he was sorry. I believed him, actually. I think he did love me, in whatever limited way someone like him could love someone like me. But love that doesn't show up is not love. Love that stands 20 feet away while your mother laughs about a man's amputated leg is not love. I wrote him back one sentence. I said, "I hope you become a better man than the one I almost married." I never heard from him again. My father got a knee replacement consultation paid for that month, not because he asked, because I called the hospital and arranged it. He didn't need to know who paid. He'd never let me otherwise. My mother retired from the bakery the following spring. We bought the building. She didn't run it anymore, but she walked over most mornings, sat at the corner table, and had coffee with whoever was working that day. The new owner kept her name on the sign. It says Corallands now. I moved out of the apartment I had shared with Hollis. I bought a brownstone in the West Village. My parents come down for Sunday dinner once a month. My father wears his old fire department jacket sometimes when we go out. Nobody ever laughs at it. Not anymore. Not in front of me. I want to tell you what I learned, because I think that's the part that matters. I spent 2 years believing that if I just loved someone hard enough, and if I just let them love me back in their own way, that everything else would sort itself out. I believed that the people in my life would eventually see my parents the way I saw them. I believed that if I was quiet about who I was being humble. I wasn't being humble. I was being afraid. I was afraid that if I told Hollis what I actually did, he wouldn't love me. I was afraid that if his family knew, they would treat me differently, and I wanted to believe that they loved me for me. And the result of all that fear was that I let people who didn't deserve a seat at my parents' table sit at the head of it for 2 years. My father walked into burning buildings twice. He didn't hesitate. He didn't wait. He didn't worry about what people would think of his jacket afterward. If a man like that is your father, you don't sit quietly behind a wall, sconce. Not him. Not ever. That's the part I wish I had understood sooner. But I understood it eventually. And the night I understood it, I picked up a microphone in front of 400 people and I told the truth about who I was and who he was and what we were going to do about it. There's a photograph I keep on my desk now. It's from that night after we got home. My mother took it on her phone. My father is sitting at our kitchen table in his suit jacket with the fire department patches. My mother is next to him, still in her navy dress with the silver buttons. There's a half-eaten slice of lemon elderflower cake on a plate between them. They're laughing. They look like the most powerful people in the world. Because they were. They are. That's what I should have told the room. That's what I'll tell you instead. I've thought about that night more times than I can count. Not the microphone part, not the announcement, I've thought about the 20 minutes before, when I sat at table 27 and watched my father look down at the tablecloth so I wouldn't see his eyes. That's the part that stays with me. That's the part I had to learn from. Here's what I understand now that I didn't understand then. Every choice in my life had been pointing toward that ballroom. I had let 2 years of small silences add up. Every time Hollis's mother said something cutting and I let it pass, I was paying for what happened that night in advance. Every time I let his family assume I was less than I was teaching them that my parents were less than they were. Cause and effect. I built that table 27 moment with my own hands, one polite nod at a time, and then I was shocked when it appeared in front of me. I shouldn't have been shocked. I should have seen it coming. The first time Tessabelle smiled at my mother, the way you smile at a stranger's dog. That's the lesson I carry forward, and the one I'd want my daughter to carry if I ever have one. Being kind is not the same as being quiet. Loving someone is not the same as letting them dishonor the people who raised you. There is a kind of humility that is really just fear in better clothes, and I wore it for 2 years, and it cost me my dignity until the night I finally took it back. But I also want to say this, because I think it matters. My father did not lose his leg saving that boy in 2018 because he was reckless. He lost it because he was prepared. He had spent 34 years learning his craft, building his strength, knowing exactly when to run in and when to walk away. That's the other thing I learned. Strength is not a moment. Strength is what you've been quietly building for years before the moment arrives. The reason I could pick up that microphone and end an empire in 4 minutes was because I had spent 9 years at Halverson Reed becoming someone who knew exactly what she was doing. The wedding didn't make me powerful. The wedding just gave me a reason to stop pretending I wasn't. So if you're listening to this and you're in your own version of Table 27 right now, I want you to hear me. Build your strength quietly. Honor the people who loved you when you had nothing. And the next time someone laughs at the jacket your father wears with pride, do not laugh along. Do not look away. Do not wait for someone else to speak. Be the one who stands up. Be the one who walks to the microphone. Be your father's daughter. That is the only kind of person I ever wanted to be, and I almost forgot it. I won't forget it again.